If it was me, I wouldn't want to be telling my kids to behave this way. And I don't think anybody else in this room would think that that was a good idea either. But apparently it's okay for people in, trusted public positions to act in this way and to get away with it up to now.
Well, for those of you in Victoria who hear the words SRL, you think of the Suburban Rail Loop. When Stephen Anthony thinks of it, he thinks of shameful rackets and lies. Stephen Anthony is a storied economist. He's Director of Macroeconomics Advisory and Senior Advisor at the Monash Centre for Financial Services. Would you make him welcome, Stephen?
Good afternoon, everyone. From the title of this presentation, you can tell I'm a huge fan of the Suburban Rail Loop. My creeping assumption, as Peter Costello said, is that this program is, let's talk about Peter Costello for a second. He said, do less and do it better. Peter Costello. Daniel Andrews, do more and do it worse. I think Peter was a little generous to Labor in Victoria. I call it Labor Incorporated. I think this thing is deliberate. All of the numbers that you heard this morning, all of the appalling productivity and government spending and waste and corruption and awfulness, I think it's deliberate. I think low rent people beneath the office were elected to positions that they should never have occupied, and that this thing has been calculated all along. It began with some port sales. I was actually leasing. That was short-termism. That worked for them. And then they just got started. They got rolling. Now, you can tell that this won't be a controversial presentation. So if you want to just take 5 or 10 minutes off, please do, but I'll get stuck into it, all right? So I've got some quotes. The first comes from the Bible, from Isaiah. And to me, it characterises the approach of Daniel Andrews and Jacinta Allen. They see everything in some sort of bizarro, black is white and white is black. Lied to the end. Just lies, 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 And this is somebody who, in working at Industry Super Australia as the chief economist, used to write op-eds that talked about the population Ponzi scheme in Victoria. And I'd get unflattering emails from Tim Pallas's office about them and all sorts of heat, Now, you could see this thing coming a mile off, This was always the program. They've just perfected it or executed it with greater daring through the years. So, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, that's exactly what it is. And then there's that wonderful quote about, I think Thomas Aquinas, corruption of the best is the worst. And how apt it is. The scorecard. So you've heard some really great numbers this morning, and I won't labour this too much more other than to say Victoria began the period from 2010 at the top of the OECD, at the very top in terms of household living standards. And where do you think it is now? And where do you think it's going to be for many years to come, even under new ownership? And who put it there? And it was a calculated decision. It was this bizarro mentality that these people have to essentially prefer their tribe over the taxpayer, over the citizenry. So we're not in democratic land anymore. We're in something else. It's very, very tribal. It's very, very, clan-oriented. It's certainly not about making life better for the working class, that's for sure. So I think the important public policy point here about Suburban Rail Loop, just tell you a little bit about Suburban Rail Loop. So it's an orbital train ride around the city of Melbourne, subterranean, so it's a tunnel. Goes for about 99 kilometres. The program itself runs for about 60 years. It's been running for about 5 years, began in 2020, and it will be finished by 2080. So everybody who's looked at this thing thinks it's going to cost at least $200 billion. And quite frankly, if you understand modern tunnelling costs, you probably end up at 300 billion in today's dollars. So that doubles our published net external liabilities and essentially gives us a debt to revenue ratio of about four times. That's insane. You just would never do that. Okay, that cannot be serviced, especially looking at global 30-year bond rates this week. It's just a bad deal. So the project begins in the east of Melbourne with something called Suburban Rail Loop East, and that runs for about 26 kilometres. And we'll get there in terms of why we start in the east, okay? But the interesting thing about this program is it was originated in a very unusual way. A few conversations on a plane flight, and then a small team in a major accounting office who developed the sort of initial plan for it, and then public announcements before elections, and then we outline the proposed route for the program, for the project in the east of Melbourne. All highly irregular, always outside of parliamentary processes, cabinet processes, very sort of narrow decision-making pathways. Used COVID to put a public corporation, to put the program within a public corporation. And that's interesting because essentially, once again, outside of ministerial control, put an interesting legal framework around the program so that essentially there could be all sorts of voluntary acquisitions of private land and large tracts of parkland, all taken into this corporation with no democratic accountability. And essentially, although there was the chimera of stakeholder consultation, the existing route for the rail network was announced and was never changed. So there was no consultation on that. There was no expert deliberation with the Transport Department who might have something to say about it, how to get value from the project. So it all reads like an orchestrated process to defraud the Victorian taxpayer, with all due respect. And I think that's exactly what Deborah Glass, the former Ombudsman for Victoria, found in her 2023 review of the project, that this thing was calculated essentially structures, the victory of structure over substance. See, substance is good public policy. Substance is a cost to benefit ratio that's a positive ratio, like $2 of benefit for $1 of cost. Here we have 50 cents of benefit for $1 of cost. That's according to the Parliamentary Budget Office of Victoria. That was known very early on. So substance is defeated by structure. These processes that obscure the truth from the Victorian taxpayer. So, like so much in modern day Australia, we're just run by Rackets, right? Here's another racket. This is the SRL racket. But I mean, of course, there's so many others. NDIS, superannuation, on and on it goes, right? So we're not talking about wealth creation, we're not talking about transactions that are welfare improving for all participants to those transactions. This is my Chicago sort of thinking about, how you get economic growth and development. No. This is all about, this isn't about truth, this is about untruth. This is that bizarro world again. So if you think about this racket in particular, we heard earlier, what the political overlay from Dan, why they may have chosen to do things the way they did and why they decided to start in the Middle East of Melbourne. The most developed retail sector of Australia, just from one major shopping centre to another, connecting the major sort of Sino-Australian interests through that corridor, and with advanced knowledge of that pathway, there are allegations that if you look at that pathway, it would be an interesting audit for someone to test whether there was advanced knowledge of it by various groups of beneficiaries to the program itself. So that's something for a Royal Commissioner, I believe. But the point is, this sort of Labour Inc., kind of a conveyor belt of people in and out of the program and government and consulting firms, it connected the project and is the secret source of why it advanced to the detriment of the Victorian taxpayer. So, really, there are just so many embedded lies in this thing. That's the substance, that's the victory of style over substance with the program. All I would say is, if it was me, I wouldn't want to be telling my kids to behave this way. And I don't think anybody else in this room would think that that was a good idea either. But apparently it's okay for people with trusted public positions to act in this way and to get away with it up to now. So what do we do about it? So, to restore normality, there's a very simple thing to do, but it's not what we're hearing from politicians at the moment. What we're hearing is pause and review. Sounds very sort of weak and whimsical. A real operator just calls it in. They just say, okay, this program is coming back to departmental government, to the general government, and we'll look at it and assess it against all our other priorities, like potholes, for example. And if it doesn't stack up, we just abolish it. It's that simple. Now, here's the thing, that just takes courage, right? You just got to do it. But you also had to be clever because you had to remove the structures that are in place to keep it alive, to keep it flourishing. So you remove the public corporation, just abolish it. And you remove the legal frameworks around the program. That's what you do. And quite frankly, so many of these rackets have these these legal structures around them. Just remove them, all right? Now, there's all sorts of other things that should occur. But they're all accountability measures. They're all they're all about connecting this Royal Commission to the review of the project. And, forensic auditing, and also considering all the contracts that have been signed and making sure that every one of those contracts is in the public interest. Because if it isn't in the public interest and there's been some illegality or mismanagement around that contract, you have grounds to review that contract, to terminate it, to cancel it. Don't let anybody ever tell you any different. This is normal operating procedure for government, for decision makers. And it's worth taking into account. Listen, I'm going to make a final point, and I'll wrap this up and hopefully stop boring you to death. Here's the thing. You think this is a state project, right? This is a Victorian problem. Is that right? It ain't. A third of the funding for this thing has to come from the federal government. And quite frankly, we've already got announced funding of close to $10 billion. All right? Now, last time I looked, the federal government has also funded many big build projects where there has been rampant corruption and criminality. And the other thing that I'm aware of is that the federal government has a corruption commission. So when are we going to get some inquiries into it? Into all of this sordid, horrible corruption that has occurred on the federal government's watch, while various infrastructure agencies or other federal agencies have made adverse findings against this program but have not acted upon them. So I just leave that in the hands of people who are far more capable than I am, but I just remind them that there is this opportunity now for transparency, for good governance, and for, wealth-enhancing approaches to move forward for the state and for the people of Australia. So I think with that, I'll thank the IPA for this opportunity to talk to you all and leave you to consider what I've told you. So thank you so much.